Hi folks, I'm Joel, and welcome to the next in our series on what is composable and learning all about composable ecosystems and composable systems and how to put them together. Today we're going to be looking at the cost of composable and how it's going to save you a ton of money, especially in compared to what we're calling traditional DXP systems or all-in-one systems. Let's dive into the content and see how you can save money with a composable system. All right, so if you remember from the video last time when we talked about a composable system, we thought about pieces of a pie and how you can have things like CMS, which I'm very passionate about, but also things like commerce, search, analytics, and personalization. And all of those can be added onto your pie. You can switch things out and do whatever you want. So you've got a lot of flexibility. Let's look at the sort of other side of the spectrum where you might have something more like a traditional DXP. And this is where everything's all in the box. When you buy DXP, you're getting CMS, search, you're getting all the different features that they have. You're also getting a lot of things that are not usually sort of associated with a composable system that much, like martech features and crm features. So literally everything you could possibly want. And I think when people buy into these things, it's like, ooh, I can use all of this stuff to run my business, and it will tell me how to run my business and kind of lead me down the right paths. And that is potentially true. And you might have started off down that path and you might find yourself using a traditional DXP that's an all-in-one package right now. But none of these things are ever best in class. In all of my experience, I have never seen a traditional DXP where the way that they do CMS is the absolute best way, or the way that they do search is the best way. Oftentimes, people will only use a few of these features, but you're paying for all of it. And that is a real sort of hassle and a real problem for traditional DXP systems. But let's look at another aspect outside of just the overall cost of the big bucket price that you might get, but also how things are hosted. A lot of traditional DXP is hosted on premise. And that might seem like it's kind of old school, but it's how people have done it for a long time. And the cost there is not only licensing. So you often have to pay either a one-time big cost or a yearly cost just for licensing and maintenance. But you've also got hardware costs. You've got to actually run this stuff. And that cost depreciates over time. That hardware wears out. So you've got to maintain that. You've got to hire staff that are specialized to look after that hardware. There's all kinds of stuff in terms of compliance. What are the fire suppression things in your on-premise, hosting environment? How does all that stuff work? That's a lot of compliance hoops that you have to jump through. And then the upgrades. And I think this is the biggest one that comes usually at the end, but that's one that's like, it adds so much time, energy, and just physical money costs on top of everything. You might have your system and it's in place and it's working, and then I'm on version 7 and it's been a few years. Ooh, we need to go up to version 10 to get these new upgrades or these new things that we want. Oh, geez. I'm going to need new hardware. My staff needs to be trained. There's all kinds of new sort of things that it does. So I need to update all my compliance stuff to get my SOC 2 compliance or my HIPAA compliance back up to date. And oh, geez, I got to rewrite all this software because it doesn't work anymore. I need the new version of Java or .NET or PHP. That's a lot of headaches. So there's a lot of sunk cost into being on premise and being with traditional DXP. When we compare that to Composable, who is often hosted in the cloud, things are a lot different. Yes, you have a license fee. Oftentimes that is negotiated yearly, and I would recommend that anytime you have a license with someone, even if you're paying monthly or paying quarterly, negotiate that thing yearly. And sometimes you can sign up for a multi-year deal that's going to save you a lot of money in the long term. So that's something you can know that, hey, if you sign up for a 3-year deal, that license fee is not changing for the next 3 years. Sometimes you can pay it all up front. There's lots of different ways you can pay. Oftentimes, folks will let you pay yearly, maybe even quarterly, maybe even monthly. Hard to say. You are going to pay for overages. This is the one thing that you're going to want to get a hold of with composable license fees is it's going to give you a certain amount of usage for things like bandwidth or just how much data, how much content you have in there. And then there's overages that are on top of that. A lot of times when you're in the procurement process, whoever you're working with can help you get into a package that will contain most of what you're going to use. But as your business grows, these overages are usually a good thing. They're a sign that your business is actually doing well. So I think that's not necessarily a negative. It's a sign that more people are visiting your website or more people are downloading your content or your team is actually putting out more blog posts or other things like that. So the overages are not necessarily a bad thing, but that license fee is something that is your cost, but usually that's it. Upgrades are not a thing. You don't have to worry about that. The provider that you're getting your composable system from is going to work the same way. All right. There's another cost that's not necessarily just in, staff or hardware or hosting or things like that. It's how much time it will take to get you to market. And with DXP, this could be with your initial build, the initial onset of, when procurement is done and you're going to start going. But it can also be with an upgrade like we talked about before. And it's often measured in years. And I'm not exaggerating here. A lot of DXP rollouts are 1 to 2 years, sometimes even 4 years. And that can be for as I say, the initial build and for an upgrade. It can take a long, long time to get these things rolled out. And the sad thing is, a lot of the features are never used. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to customers where they're moving off of a DXP and saying, why should I keep paying for feature XYZ that I've never used? And that's a really good point. The interesting thing is, the whole history of composable systems really evolved out of folks that were augmenting their DXP. And if you're in a situation where you're already using one of these bigger vendors and maybe you've already got something in place and you're looking at, oh my gosh, do I want to upgrade this thing? Do I want to renegotiate my licensing for this thing? You can augment that system with DXP. And we've done this a lot of times where maybe you have one department that needs to do something a little more nimble. You can actually get a composable system in place that might actually be a lot cheaper than even using your existing DXP, because you don't need to use as much staff time and you can get it to market a lot faster and you don't need any new hardware. So we've seen that happen a lot of times, especially in really bigger enterprise companies where they'll have a couple departments that just need to do a few different things that are sort of outside of the purview of what's already implemented in their current DXP. That's usually a good way to get a foot in the door for a new composable system. So if that's you, then definitely we want to have a conversation about how you might want to do that. We've seen that work a lot of times. And sometimes that's like the foot in the door to start replacing the bigger DXP with a composable system. Time to market with Composable is a little more of a timeline. What we often recognize is that there's like a phased approach that works really well, especially because I don't need to add all of the pieces of the pie at once. I might start off with, if I have a CMS site, if it's just replacing my website, maybe I just want to do the CMS portion of that. And sometimes that can be as little as like 6 weeks. Especially if you're not doing the whole site at once and you just want to do more of an incremental step-by-step approach, which I've blogged about and done videos about in the past. And then phase two, I'm just making up some numbers here, but maybe phase two is 3 months. And so maybe we added on, search and a new analytics or something like that to sort of augment what had been built and built on top of this initial phase one. And then phase three might be a little bit longer. That's 6 months. And now we've got the commerce section added into there. And then, look at phase four, where it's like, now we're fully complete. We've got everything implemented, and maybe we added on the personalization layer. So at each one of these, there's going to be new costs added onto it as, we add the different pieces of the pie, add on the search, add on the analytics, but you're not paying for them until you use them. And you look at this is not measured in years. This is less than a year to get everything rolled out, and you're only paying for what you use. And what's great is, at the end of 9 months, at the end of phase four, if I don't like one of the components, if it doesn't work, then you can swap that out. Yes, there is some work to swap those components out, but you already know what that work is because you just did it. And so a lot of the times we're really building on top of a foundation here. And oftentimes I will say the CMS is the foundation of both DXP and a lot of composable systems. So is the commerce portion of those. Those are usually the pieces that don't get swapped out as much, but all of the other layers, your search, your analytics, your personalization, all these things and how they work, they can swap out in and out really easily. Your orchestration layers, those are things that you want to be able to get there and put in. Those are kind of foundational layers, but everything can work together in a composable system. So there's a lot to consider when we're looking at the cost comparisons between composable systems and DXP systems. There's a lot to think about in terms of how much it's just going to cost you just in things like time, materials, staff, all those different things you need to keep in mind. But I will say, composable systems are the future. They're where things are going. You may see in the current market of the composable players where they start to consolidate and to buy up other players. But even then, all of those systems are still meant to work independently. So if you do go with a vendor that has purchased another vendor, make sure that you can use other products independently. And in my experience, this is what we've seen. And if you go down the composable road, you open your doors for future expansion and really future-proof your setup and your architecture. And hoping we can talk about this more with more videos in this series. So stay tuned.